I have to say thank you to all of you for being here, and particularly to the organizers for this, because I know that community-run events are the lifeblood of this community, this broad global community that we have, and people being excited and hand-raising and active in these communities is how this gets started. So the accidental brilliance or careful design subtitle here, I'm going to say it's both. There are some things that were careful design, and then there were a lot that were accidental brilliance. So let's get started on this. So as Lucas said, I first ran into Kubernetes in 2015. Let me just double check. I do have a timer, good. As Lucas said, I first ran into Kubernetes in 2015 when I was leading OSCON, O'Reilly Media's open source conference. And we did a 1.0 launch party there. And I got to talk with some of the early Google engineers and product people who had this really, really amazing vision for Kubernetes. And at the time, it was just sort of making that shift. It was that first year, 2014 to 15, where mostly Red Hat and Google were working on this. And we sat and we talked with all of the people that were those leaders. And as I like to say, all 7 of the 4 founders of Kubernetes had really different ideas about what they wanted out of this, but they knew it needed to be big, because what they really wanted to do was change the conversation about cloud computing. Now, what do we mean by change the conversation about cloud computing? That they were looking to, as Google, because at the time we had Amazon in production for AWS. We had Google sort of in beta status and a lot of stuff. They had compute engine, but not a lot of other infrastructure yet for Google Cloud. And then following on quickly was Microsoft Windows Azure. I'm sorry, in 2015 it was called Windows Azure. And we were seeing that a lot of people were moving toward cloud, which was very cool. But Googlers needed to find a way to get GCP to be a little bit more of a relevant cloud at the time. Now, how many of you, I get to play the how many of you have been in the community for how long game. So I'm going to say you're all in the community now, so let's raise your hands. Okay, so in 2024, who was in this community? Okay, good, most of you. 2023, we'll skip back. 2020, ooh, more hands go down. 2018, yeah, 16, woo, we've still got some. 15, we've got a couple, yay. How many, anybody work between the zero, the release and the 1.0? Was anybody around playing with Kubernetes during that? We've got a couple, yay. Okay, so at the time, way back, we've rolled all the way back to 2015, 14, 15. At the time, when someone was asking you to deliver a piece of software, like as an independent software vendor, they were like, do you have an AMI for that? Now, the question here is, what did that A stand for? Anyone? Come. Amazon, yes. It did not stand for Google Cloud Platform or Azure. It stood for Amazon. So everyone, when you were asking for software at the time, was asking for a particular VM for Amazon, which really made it hard to, say, portably move things over to Google or Azure as it was coming out. But that said, Google had the strategy. How do we get a wedge in the door? And Docker was coming up in the world and was this super cool way to interface with containers, which, by the way, had already been around for 10 years. But Docker was a great way to interface with them. So Docker was coming up, everybody was rolling their own orchestration system, and Google went, well, we do containers. We've done containers forever. How can we show how we do containers better? So this is the thesis behind Kubernetes. Well, let's disintermediate the AMI. So it was a really important business thing. But in order to do that, you had to build a cross-industry collaboration. You know, no one in this industry moves because one community or one company says so anymore. You know, in maybe 2010 or so, 5 or so, maybe you could have done something because Google jumped or Amazon jumped. But at this point, by 2015, people were a little bit skeptical. The big cloud companies, you didn't move the whole industry because of that. So I got asked to come in and look at the people portion of this. So I got asked to come apply for a job at Google in order to move Kubernetes from company-led to community-led. Because during that time period, I had been talking with the founders and talking to them about how we really needed everyone in the industry to understand they had skin in the game. There were rewards to them personally, to their company, and then also to the broader community and project if we could have them participate, engage. And the only way to do that is to accept that people are super messy. So that first logo I showed on 2015, it's this one here. So if you're trying to say, dear community, we're doing this all together, is there a problem with this logo? Anyway, pretty quickly, we started and changed that and moved on to the much more common logo you see today. But in that transition from Kubernetes by Google to Kubernetes as a part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, we had to go through a lot of governance building because people are messy, as I said. And people don't understand or like shadowy power structures. And that made it really tough in those early days. How would you get something done? How would you decide? I want to put in a new feature. There was no such thing as a KEP at the time. How would you get that feature approved? Well, you had to know who to ask inside Google, and you kind of had to know who else to ask to tell them it was a good idea, to start moving the little social pieces around to get something brought into the project. And those were the sort of messy conversations and messy people stuff that the engineers didn't really want to pay attention to, but we knew we had to build in a transparent and open and consistent and well-documented way. Otherwise, we weren't going to have the whole industry think this was a great idea to offer their effort and time to make a Google project, Kubernetes by Google, to make that a huge thing. So this is how we ended up with Kubernetes as an open standard or an open source project and an open community and open governance project. I worked with Gross Gardler at one point at Microsoft, and he was a longtime Apache contributor and ASF board member at one point. And he said, and I love this quote, in an open source community, things grow to look like the people who are most active. And in that, we developed Kubernetes in this very manner. The people who were doing things that were super important and that we thought that we needed in the community, those were the people that were rewarded. Those were the people that were put into leadership positions, the people who were actively engaging and building on this collaborative community and who weren't working specifically for a single corporate aim or for a single individual aim. So one of the things that we said over the growth of this is that culture eats governance for breakfast. So we went around establishing the culture of Kubernetes in a way that preceded the governance rules, because the rules come to play over time, but you have to sort of establish what they look like first by trying some things on and how that, this is the accidental brilliance portions. We'd try some things, they'd work. We'd try some other things, they'd not work. But we would invest in the spaces and double down in the spaces where things worked. And so one of those tenets that we really looked at was making sure that you empowered enthusiasm. Now, interestingly, this can be positive enthusiasm or negative enthusiasm. Because if you have someone showing up over and over and over in a community complaining about something, they've got a lot of energy toward your project. If it can be sort of flipped by making them in charge of that thing that they're so concerned about, it's astonishing how much work they'll do for you and how much they'll work to improve things. So one of the tenets was very much to empower enthusiasm. We worked consistently to grow new leaders. We have seen too many open source projects get sort of stuck and ossified when there's not a clear way to grow new leaders, to mentor people, to give up your power position, step away from a community for a while, and allow new leaders to grow in. So we spent a lot of time making sure that we were growing new leaders. And then out of all of this culture building, we knew we needed to sit down and evaluate and define values within Kubernetes. And what those values were, because most engineers here, I'm gonna ask for hands again here in a moment. Most people, engineers who think about, what are the values of this organization, or what are the values of this project? A lot of people are like, that's kind of squishy, who cares? Of course we want all these good things, right? So how many of you want those? Or say that the values are like that, doing values work? Oh, you're just humoring. Oh, a few of you do, okay, good. It's like you're all just humoring me. Because when I say develop values, I think values are most useful when they help you make decisions. So the values of the Kubernetes community that evolved over the first 2 years or so was that the company, or sorry, I say that wrong every time, the community is more important than the company, distribution is more important than centralization, improvement is more important than stagnation, and automation is more important than process. And with these values, if you come to a question inside, is this the right direction to take the project? Is this the right answer to a problem we have? You can actually use these values to give you little guide markers on the decision. And so, to me, these values are not only about making sure that you can say what the community stands for, but they're useful markers for your leadership or anyone in the community to remind the leadership of, to say, I think we're going in the wrong direction. This is something that's privileging a company. Or I think we're going in the wrong direction. I see us centralizing something instead of distributing it. So these are the values that you can use to make decisions. And then, of course, over and over and over, we spent time rewarding good behaviors. So if there was something we needed more of it in the community, we invested heavily to make sure that those people, like Lucas, as in the early days, were rewarded and were given classic gamification opportunities, status in the community, access to resources or people or mentorship, power to make decisions over a particular chunk of the code base, or stuff, the swag that we all wear with the community logos on it that show us our tribal affiliation. So these different methods were the way that we intentionally and through lots of serendipitous experiments ended up building out a community that you all are participating in today. So we lost the content on this one, but this was to say, focus on, build a community, build that organization, build that space together, and when you work together, you end up building something much better and much stronger than you could ever build by yourself. So I speak regularly about a positive sum game and how to build in the world today in that way. Thank you all.